Cannabis is not just a plant. To reduce it to a commodity, a simple drug, or a recreational pastime is to fundamentally misunderstand its place and power in the spiritual journey of humankind. In our modern world, conversations about cannabis are often polarized and binary, framed as arguments between medicine and menace, a spiritual gateway, or a numbing escape, something sacred or something sinful. But these labels are only the surface. None of them reach the core of what cannabis truly represents in the context of the soul. At its core, cannabis is a test, a mirror, and most people, by virtue of the times, the culture, or their own unreadiness, are failing that test. Why? Because cannabis does not conform to our beliefs or desires about it. The plant is not here to serve our expectations. It is not here to decorate the ego or provide escape from discomfort. Instead, cannabis serves as an amplifier, magnifying whatever is already inside us. It is precisely this quality that makes it both a powerful ally and a dangerous companion on the path of self-discovery. In the spiritual traditions of the ancient world, cannabis was never a way to pass the time. It was not a crutch or a trend, but a portal. A tool for transformation wielded only by those who were fully prepared to encounter themselves in total honesty, with no distractions, no filters. Shamans, mystics, and seekers in these traditions used cannabis not to enhance the ego, but to dissolve it, to strip away layers of illusion and reveal the deepest truths of the self. In contrast, our current age has turned this once sacred tool into a commodity, sold like candy, used like a toy, and worshipped as a lifestyle accessory. What was ritual has become routine, the sacred reduced to spectacle. This is not a debate about whether cannabis is good or bad. The plant is beyond such judgments. The real question is, what does cannabis do to the soul? And what does our relationship to this plant say about the state of our spiritual life, both as individuals and as a culture? Part 1. The Ancient Key: Ritual, Reverence, and Responsibility. Long before cannabis was ever rolled into a joint or branded for profit, it was regarded as a key that could unlock the inner temple of the spirit. But in ancient times, this key was handed out with tremendous care and reverence, and only to those who knew what door they were opening. At the dawn of civilization, cannabis was never used casually. It was a tool strictly reserved for moments and spaces that were sacred, aligned with the cycles and rhythms of spirit. It was employed in the context of ritual, fasting, prayer, and solitude, not as a distraction from life's burdens, but as a means of seeing through them. Cannabis in the ancient Indian tradition. In ancient India, cannabis was intimately associated with the god Shiva, the divine force of destruction and transformation. Shiva is not the destroyer in the sense of annihilating for its own sake, but in dissolving illusion so that deeper truth can be revealed. His devotees, the sadhus, did not smoke for entertainment. Their use of cannabis, most commonly through the chillum, was sacramental, an act meant to symbolize the death of the ego, the surrendering of personal identity, in the pursuit of union with the divine. Taoist and Sufi approaches. In Taoist alchemy, cannabis was blended with other herbs in complex formulas designed to refine the practitioner's energy cultivate silence within, and trigger visionary dreams. Its use was meticulous and deliberate, always with the intention of awakening subtle perception, never of numbing or escaping reality. Ancient texts described cannabis as a spirit ally, capable of either sharpening insight or unbalancing energy, QE, depending on the inner alignment of the user. To the unprepared, it was a test. To the adept, a gift. Among Sufi mystics, hashish was sometimes used in sacred ceremonies with the aim of dissolving the self in divine presence. Yet even among the Sufis, the plant was controversial. Rumi, the celebrated poet-mystic, cautioned against intoxication that mimics awakening but leaves the soul untouched, warning that the plant must lead to ego dissolution, not its inflation. The Rastafari tradition. For the Rastafari, cannabis, ganja, is considered the healing of the nations, but its use is never divorced from spiritual context. Cannabis is prayed over and consumed within reasoning sessions, communal gatherings where conversation and smoke rise together in the pursuit of wisdom and alignment with the divine. It is a tool of communion, not escape, inseparable from the liturgy of everyday life. In these sacred circles, cannabis is not a means to forget the world, but to remember the divine within it. Part 2. Modernity and the loss of the sacred container. In stark contrast to these ancient practices, modern Western society has stripped cannabis of its ritual power. The plant that once demanded deep preparation and intentionality now demands nothing at all. It is available at drive-thrus, rolled and ready, to be consumed in the pauses between notifications and scrolling. What was once a profound rite of passage has become just another form of entertainment, a background hum to the incessant noise of digital life. What makes this change so dangerous is not the plant itself, but our relationship to it. Without the structure of ritual and reverence, cannabis loses its compass. Without a container, all that remains is sensation. Sensation without direction, which quickly becomes indulgence. The plant that once opened the doors to the temple now merely amplifies whatever state we happen to be in, for better or for worse. Cannabis does not provide consistency, it offers amplification. If you are centered, it may deepen your insight and sense of presence. If you are confused or lost, it will intensify that confusion. Most people do not realize that they are, metaphorically, entering a sacred temple with muddy feet, then wondering why their vision is clouded and all they see are shadows. Part 3. Cannabis as mirror, the shadow and the revelation. Perhaps the most profound spiritual truth about cannabis is this: it is a mirror. It reveals. It does not invent. The plant does not care about your vibe or your beliefs about it. It cares about your intention and your readiness. This is why, across spiritual traditions, preparation was the true ritual. Fasting, chanting, silence, and cleansing rituals were not mere superstition, but acts of spiritual hygiene, designed to stabilize the mind and body before expanding them. Used with reverence, cannabis is not a drug, it is a door. But doors open both ways. They can admit light or shadow, clarity or confusion. The most dangerous illusion is to believe that one can handle both, when in fact one is prepared for neither. This explains why so many people today report feelings of anxiety, paranoia, or even a sense of being watched while under the influence of cannabis. These experiences are often blamed on bad strains, wrong dosages, or chemical idiosyncrasies. But what if the plant is doing exactly what it was always meant to do? Strip away the noise, pierce illusion, and reveal what has been hidden. Carl Jung called this hidden territory the shadow, the parts of our psyche we have rejected, forgotten, or never dared to acknowledge. The shadow is not evil, but it is uncomfortable, not malicious, but inconvenient. Cannabis does not generate these qualities, but brings them to the surface, amplifying what is already present. If your inner music is harmony, the plant amplifies that. If your music is unresolved pain, the plant makes that pain unmistakable. This is the part of the cannabis journey that few want to talk about, because it does not fit the popular narrative of relaxation and good vibes. But any serious spiritual practitioner will tell you, the path to awakening always leads first through discomfort, the underworld, and confrontation. Not light, not visions, but the dark terrain of the self. Cannabis, when used consciously, can be an effective tool for this journey. If you are ready, if you are willing to see your own face without the mask. Part 4. The breakdown of ego. The purpose of discomfort. In mystical psychology, this moment of exposure is not considered failure, but an invitation. The anxiety or paranoia that creeps in after smoking, the spiraling sense of self-consciousness, the feeling of dissolution. These are not signs that something is going wrong. Rather, they are signs that your psychological filters are breaking down. Your ego's fortress is being breached. The guard dogs of your mind, which have kept your deepest truths hidden, are panicking because the truth is being revealed. Modern culture is ill-equipped to help people navigate this process. There is no shaman, no elder, no circle of support. The seeker is left alone, staring at the ceiling in the dark, heart racing, struggling to understand why the experience feels so overwhelming. The truth is, cannabis is doing what it has always done, dissolving the artificial and burning away the performance. If you are not prepared for this, it can feel like a nightmare, but that is not the fault of the plant. It is the reality of true encounter. Esoteric traditions were aware of this. In the literature of psychic self-defense, such as that written by Dion Fortune, altered states are described as making the energy body porous, susceptible not just to insights, but to external energetic interference. If your inner world is chaotic, cannabis will not fix it. It will amplify it, turning up the volume so that all your inner turbulence becomes inescapably loud. This amplification is necessary for healing, because what is buried must surface before it can be resolved. But if you run from this surfacing, or numb it with distractions, the cycle repeats, high after high, until nothing feels sacred anymore, only noisy and chaotic. Part 5. The lie of comfort and the truth of revelation. Cannabis is natural, but that does not mean it is automatically safe. It does not distinguish between the prepared and the unprepared. It does not decide who should see and who should sleep. It simply opens the curtain, exposing whatever is on the other side. What you do with what is revealed is your responsibility alone. Here lies one of the greatest misunderstandings: the belief that cannabis is supposed to make you feel better. This is a lie. The truth is, it is supposed to make you to see what is present in your inner world, whether that be joy or pain, peace or confusion. These are all forms of information, signals from your soul saying, "Here, look at this." But because we have been conditioned to fear discomfort, we call these moments bad trips and walk away having learned nothing. We blame the plant for our anxiety rather than recognize that it has simply exposed what was already there. In this way, cannabis is one of the most honest substances in existence, but honesty is not always kind, and truth does not always feel good. Cannabis is a mirror. Sometimes what it reflects is difficult, but it may be exactly what you need to see. Part 6. Sensation is not truth. The trap of spiritual inflation. One of the greatest spiritual traps is to mistake sensation for truth. Cannabis is a master of seduction in this regard. Light up, and you may feel your mind opening, your thoughts growing deeper, music becoming more profound, synchronicities appearing as messages from the universe. You may journal insights that feel more inspired than anything you would write while sober. All of it feels mystical, meaningful. But is any of it actually transforming you? The high itself is seductive, but it often only mimics transcendence. Feeling expanded is not the same as becoming whole. Cannabis can easily create the appearance of spiritual clarity, without the foundation required to hold that clarity in ordinary life. This is its true danger, not bodily harm, but the risk of tricking the soul into believing it has arrived. Many people come to believe they have evolved simply because they felt something profound while high. But depth is not measured by intensity. It is measured by what you carry back from the experience and how you live once the experience fades. If the insight floats in the ether, never applied, it leads to what esoteric traditions call spiritual inflation, the swelling of the ego around the idea of transformation without the work that sustains it. In Hermetic and occult traditions, this phenomenon is known as the false light. In Kabbalistic mysticism, it is the sphere of Hod, the glow of the intellect divorced from grounded practical truth. It may shine like gold, but it crumbles like ash. Many long-term cannabis users begin to confuse insight with identity. They wear the experience as a costume, quoting mystics and philosophers, but their actual lives remain unchanged. The plant becomes a prop in a performance of spiritual progress. Osho once remarked, "Substances open doors that only silence should open." This is not a denial of their power, but a warning about their instability. A door opened by force does not stay open, and the vision it provides can easily become distorted if the mind is not ready to receive it. The high can become a pedestal, a place from which one looks down on those who have not seen the light. But in reality, nothing has been seen clearly, only felt intensely. Part 7. Integration. The true alchemy. Cannabis can indeed provide perspective, but unless that perspective becomes practice, it is just another form of stimulation. If it does not shift how you engage with conflict, process suffering, or serve others, it is a spiritual distraction, dressed as awakening. The true danger is not in the plant or the smoke, but in the stories you tell yourself about what it all means. The high is not the truth, it is a doorway. And if you stand in that doorway forever, thinking you have arrived, you never actually step into the room. You become addicted not to the substance, but to the illusion of progress, a far more insidious dependency than any chemical one. Spiritual traditions with real depth never glorified the high. They used it to point to something deeper, to demand more of the practitioner. Real awakening is measured not by what happens during the ceremony, but by what emerges afterward, in the silence, the choices, and the humility to recognize that seeing something once is not the same as understanding it. Cannabis offers access, not arrival. But what the world needs is not more access to the sacred, but more people willing to anchor the sacred in how they live, to embody the truth, not just to feel it. Cannabis touches not just the mind, but the subtle energy body, the invisible architecture of your being that carries thoughts, emotions, and energetic imprints. When cannabis interacts with that field, it does not ask permission. It amplifies whatever is present. For some, this unlocks intuition and sensitivity. For others, it brings chaos. The chaos is not random. It is the product of energy that has not been cleared. Think of the subtle body as a musical instrument. When it is tuned, cannabis can act as a bow, drawing out harmony. When it is dusty or misaligned, it amplifies only noise. And in that noise, people mistake stimulation for wisdom. Part 8. The importance of energetic hygiene and ritual spiritual traditions that truly understand the power of cannabis speak not just of physical preparation, but of energetic hygiene. This is not some abstract, mystical notion. It is as practical and real as the need for physical cleanliness. Just as you would not perform a sacred ritual while physically dirty, you should not enter into altered states with a cluttered energetic field. Practices such as fasting, breath work, chanting, cold exposure, prayer, and especially silence are not mere accessories. They are clearing rituals that stabilize your internal world. They ensure that when you open the spiritual door with a plant ally like cannabis, you are stepping into a space that is clean, focused, and capable of holding what may emerge. In energetic healing traditions such as Reiki, cannabis is sometimes described as a field disruptor. This is not because it is inherently negative, but because it creates a sudden surge in sensitivity. For practitioners who are not grounded, sessions can become chaotic or unstable after using the plant. Sensations increase, but control decreases. The same pattern is seen in Kundalini work. Cannabis can awaken dormant energy before the body or nervous system is ready to channel it. The initial euphoria or sense of opening can quickly give way to crashing, spiraling, or an inability to ground the experience in everyday life. Amazonian shamans are clear on this point. Every plant opens something, but every plant also tests the person who consumes it. Each plant is considered to possess its own consciousness, spirit, or frequency. When that spirit enters you, it begins to communicate, never in words, but in emotions, memories, energetic impressions. If you are not clean mentally, emotionally, spiritually, that communication becomes scrambled. Instead of clarity, you get confusion, disguised as insight. This is the real reason so many people feel drained, unfocused, or emotionally raw after heavy cannabis use. It is not that the plant is inherently depleting. Rather, it is that they entered the experience without preparation, containment, or reverence. It's like plugging a sensitive musical instrument into a damaged amplifier. The result is not music, but noise. The longer you remain exposed to this distortion, the more it wears down your natural sensitivity and clarity. Cannabis interacts with your energetic body like fire interacts with a dry forest. It can bring light and transformation, but only if the space is prepared and clean. Otherwise, it simply burns, consuming your focus and your willpower, leading to a fog that feels peaceful on the surface, but is actually a dull stagnation. The subtle danger is that you begin to call this fog calm. You mistake the dulling of sensation for healing, when in fact, real healing is about clarity, the return of power, not its suspension. Used without energetic awareness, cannabis can mask imbalance temporarily, but does not resolve it. Part 9. Preparation of the inner temple. The essential question then is your system clean enough for clarity? Have you prepared your inner temple before you invite the plant in? Because cannabis does not clean the house. It just turns on the lights. What you see is determined entirely by what was already present. In times past, cannabis was used only when the soul was truly ready. Today, it is used simply because the week is ended, or because boredom or stress appears. The shift from sacred to routine was gradual, subtle, and often disguised as liberation. What was once intentional became impulsive. The journey moved from smoker's spirit to smoker's content. In this process, the plant did not lose its power, but we lost the understanding of how to hold that power wisely. In Rastafari tradition, cannabis was never used in isolation, as a tool to cope with stress and solitude. Instead, it was integrated into sacred reasoning sessions, ritual gatherings for collective reflection and connection. The smoke rose with the chants and the heartbeat of drums. It was a communal ascent, never a personal escape. The purpose was not simply to feel good, but to align with God, Source, the One. If the heart was not clean, the herb would reveal it, not as entertainment, but as initiation. In many African diaspora traditions, especially in Afro-Brazilian religions such as Candomblé and Umbanda, cannabis was not always central, but the principle held that every plant had a spiritual frequency and a purpose. To misuse a plant was to misuse its energy, inviting imbalance and spiritual confusion. The ritual determined the effect. The ceremony created the container. Nothing sacred was taken without being earned. There was no casual consumption, only communion. This is what the modern world resists. Ritual requires time, discipline, humility, and the willingness to inconvenience oneself for the sake of the sacred. Capitalism, in contrast, thrives on convenience. Thus, the plant was extracted from its cultural roots, sanitized for mass consumption, and rebranded as a lifestyle product. It is now wrapped in pastel packaging, endorsed by influencers, and sold alongside wellness smoothies, marketed only as something that will make you feel better. No mention is made of the shadow, the mirror, or the discomfort that is integral to its power. Part 10. the loss of ceremony, the rise of distraction. The commercialization of cannabis has resulted in the deletion of ceremony. The sacred has become a product. Now people light up while binge-watching TV or scrolling through their phones, layering stimulation upon stimulation, never allowing the plant to perform its true function. Even at festivals that claim to be spiritual, with incense and ecstatic music, the ritual is often reduced to a performance, the essence of the plant lost beneath layers of aesthetic. But cannabis has no interest in aesthetics. Its spirit is ancient, wild, and uncompromisingly real. It cares nothing for branding or appearances, only for your intention. Without a proper container, its energy spills out, flowing into your distractions, anxieties, and wounds. The plant amplifies your current state. For some, this means inspiration and clarity. For others, stagnation and confusion. When we stripped away the ritual, we stripped away the structure that gave the experience meaning. What is left is entertainment masked as healing, a hollow echo of what was once holy. The plant itself has not changed, but our use of it has. Until we reclaim the container, the structure, and the sacredness, the experience will continue to feel inconsistent, shallow, or chaotic. The ritual was never a performance for the divine. It was preparation for the participant to cleanse the mind, heart, and energy so that when the plant opened the door, you could walk through with grace, not confusion. The most dangerous misconception is that intention alone is enough. Cannabis, like all spiritual allies, does not operate on sentimentality. It responds to readiness and clarity of inner world, not wishful thinking. Part 11. Intention, avoidance, and sacred use. Too many seekers approach cannabis with curiosity but no compass. They light up to feel better, think deeper, escape boredom, or soften the edges of stress. But they forget, the plant does not give peace. It reveals whether or not peace was already present. Used with discernment, cannabis can be a profound ally, helping you detach from ego noise, see your patterns more clearly, soften the grip of internal narratives. But the key is never the plant. The key is who you are when you meet it. Without structure, experience becomes slippery. Without reflection, insight evaporates. Without grounding, openness leads to fragmentation. How do you use the plant without being used by it? First, understand, cannabis should never be the first response. If you feel anxious, do not reach for it. Sit with the anxiety. Ask questions. If you are restless, move your body, breathe, journal. Explore those sensations first. Only when the body is settled and the mind is clear can the plant become a tool for refinement rather than disruption. Before you use cannabis, ask, what am I seeking? Clarity or comfort? Truth or temporary relief? Am I using the plant in alignment or in avoidance? There is a profound difference between using cannabis to explore consciousness and using it to mute what consciousness is trying to reveal. One path is sacred. The other is just another loop of avoidance. The wisest traditions never relied on cannabis alone. It was always one element in a larger ecosystem. Fasting, silence, chanting, prayer, breath work, and cleansing. These were not optional extras. They were the foundation that helped prepare the vessel, clear the clutter, and tune the nervous system so the plant could do its deeper work. Grounding is crucial. Smoke in silence. Sit on the earth. Stay off your phone. Turn off the noise. Let the plant guide you inward, not outward. Write down what comes up, reflect, and most importantly, integrate. Real alchemy happens not in what you see, but in what you do with what you see. Without integration, cannabis becomes a form of spiritual entertainment. You start chasing the feeling rather than doing the work. It becomes part of your identity. You believe your depth comes from the plant rather than from within. This is the beginning of dependency, not chemical, but existential. You forget. The plant is just a mirror. The real depth was always in you. The real journey begins when you learn to access those states without any external tool. You are not meant to live inside the high, but to return from it and bring its lessons into daily life. The insight is not the prize. Transformation is. Can you remain kind without feeling euphoric? Stay present without chemical help? Walk through conflict, boredom, routine, and still remain awake? That is the test. To use the plant without letting it become your source of meaning. The plant opens the door, but only you can walk the path. Part 12. Cannabis and Community. The Collective Container. One of the deepest spiritual truths revealed in the world's sacred lineages is that cannabis was never meant to be used in isolation. Across cultures and centuries, the plant's spiritual use was almost always collective. This was not because people couldn't access altered states alone, but because those who understood the plant knew. Without a container, power becomes unpredictable. Without community, insight can become distortion. In the Rastafari tradition, for example, cannabis is not casually smoked for entertainment or escape. It is woven into reasoning sessions, intentional gatherings where the herb is passed with reverence, accompanied by scripture, conscious discussion, chanting, and the collective pursuit of truth. The focus is not to get high, but to get aligned. Words are shared with weight. Silence is honored. Each participant is both student and teacher, the herb moving clockwise, symbolizing the cycle of life and time. In this space, cannabis is a bridge, not the destination. Similar principles are found in Amazonian and Central African spiritual practices. Even if cannabis was not the central sacrament, as ayahuasca or tobacco might be, substances that alter perception were only consumed within strict boundaries. When the group was assembled, the ritual set, the intention spoken. The journey was never just for the individual, but always for the container, the song, the prayer, the fury, the elders, and the spirits unseen. You never journeyed alone. Even with eyes closed, you were held by the circle. The value was not only in what the plant revealed to you, but in how others helped you interpret and ground the experience when you returned. In this context, transformation did not happen in isolation, but through community reflection, accountability, and shared wisdom. Contrast this with the modern experience: a joint in one hand, a phone in the other. No grounding, no preparation, no exit strategy. Only stimulus layered upon stimulus. What could have been a sacred opening becomes just another episode of dissociation. This is where fragmentation begins. The insight cracks you open, but without a circle to help you close, it fails to integrate. You are left with half-remembered thoughts, private revelations, and the loneliness of confusing intensity for enlightenment. In real circles, something different happens. You are witnessed. You are heard. You are reminded that your experience matters, not only for you, but for the community. The plant does not simply give, it asks, what will you do with this vision? Will you live differently? Serve more deeply? Heal yourself and others? In sacred circles, the ego has less room to perform. You cannot pretend to be awakened when others see through your facade. There is no hiding in ceremony, and that is precisely what makes the process real. In community, not everything you feel is taken as truth. Not every idea that emerges in the high is assumed sacred. Some are projections, some are noise, some are just your ego trying on new costumes. The circle helps sort signal from static, testing the vision in the light of shared reality and lived experience. Even in modern cities, sacred containers can be created. Friends gathering with intention, phones off, candles lit, a moment of silence before and after, and the shared commitment to reflect and integrate. You do not need a jungle or a temple. You need reverence, ritual, and community. Without these, cannabis floats like incense in a windy room, beautiful but directionless. The plant spirit asks for structure because its power is real. In a collective setting, it can magnify clarity, healing, and vision. Alone and ungrounded, it can magnify confusion, illusion, or ego. The question then is not only why you use cannabis, but who you use it with. The presence or absence of a sacred container often determines whether the plant becomes your teacher or your distraction. Part 13. The End of Novelty and the True Beginning. There comes a point in every sincere seeker's journey where the thrill of the experience loses its shine. The novelty wears off. The visions become repetitive. The insights start to echo things you have heard before. This is when the deeper path begins, not with more intensity, but with more honesty. Because real work does not happen while high, but in how you live once sober. At this stage, discernment becomes the new high. It is not stimulation, but clarity. Not euphoria, but alignment. Cannabis can open doors. This has never been in question. The real challenge is not opening doors, but walking through them with humility, intention, and willingness to integrate. Most people avoid this step, preferring the chase for new sensation to the discipline of honest reflection. It is easier to light up than to sit still, easier to feel deep than to live deep. But feeling something does not make it true, and seeing something does not make it real. The difference is discernment, the ability to separate echo from essence, to question even your most profound experiences, to ask, is this truth, or is this just what I want to hear? In Greek philosophy, this quality is called krino, the inner blade that cuts through illusion. In Vedanta, it is viveka, the power to distinguish the real from the unreal. This is not cynicism, but spiritual maturity, the ability to examine insights, to see whether they translate into the way you live, serve, and relate to others. Cannabis will offer both genuine revelation and seductive illusion. If you are not grounded, you will build belief systems out of metaphors and emotions that were never meant to be taken literally. Part 14. The Trap of Spiritual Inflation. Without discernment, you can fall into the trap of spiritual inflation. The ego rebrands itself as awakened, speaking in mystical language, quoting scripture, collecting insights but never living them. Sensitivity is mistaken for superiority. The high becomes not just a physical addiction, but a spiritual one. You become addicted to feeling special, to being in the know. This is where discernment must come first, before cannabis becomes a spiritual tool. The plant amplifies what is already present. If you carry confusion, it will bloom. If you carry clarity, it will deepen. The plant does not discriminate. It simply reflects. The challenge is to sharpen your inner blade, to ask uncomfortable questions about your intention, your expectations, your patterns. Sometimes, the greatest test is to know when to set the plant down, not because it is evil, but because it is no longer needed. True wisdom was never in the leaf, but in the remembrance, the leaf inspired within you. Cannabis is not the path, but the compass. It can point, direct, and clarify, but it cannot walk for you. It cannot carry you. The mirror it holds does not create. It only reflects. If you become obsessed with the reflection, you forget the journey itself. Many seekers never pass this stage. They stop at sensation, at poetic insight. But the true mystic, the real spiritual practitioner, learns to trust the quiet after the high, to listen for what is not wrapped in euphoria, to sit with discomfort and ask what lesson it carries. The goal is not to stay high, but to stay awake. Not just when the plant opens your eyes, but every day, in every situation. Part 15. Beyond the plant, integration and embodiment. There comes a time when every spiritual tool must be set down, every shortcut surrendered, every high examined for what it truly was, a spark, a signal, a beginning, never a destination. Cannabis is not the answer. At its best, it is a teacher. At its worst, another distraction masquerading as depth. If you are listening carefully, you will know when it is time to stop chasing the smoke and begin building the fire within yourself. The greatest lesson cannabis can teach is that you never truly needed it. Its value is not in what it gives, but in how it helps you remember what was already inside. Clarity, stillness, insight, connection. The plant only peels back what you had forgotten to feel. But remembering is not the same as becoming. The journey does not end with what you saw. It begins with what you do next. Ancient traditions never glorified the plant. They respected it as a doorway, not a crutch. The ceremony was never the end, but the beginning of integration. You took what you saw and turned it into action, presence, humility. You loved with fewer conditions, served from a deeper place, faced conflict with openness. What good is vision if it never changes how you live? What use is insight if it never transforms your response to the mundane and the difficult? It is easy to feel spiritual in smoke and silence, much harder in the grit of daily life, in traffic, heartbreak, repetition, and boredom. But this is where true spiritual growth happens, not on the mountaintop, but in the valley, not in altered states, but in the choice to remain awake when it would be easier to go back to sleep. Integration is not glamorous. It is not psychedelic, not aesthetic. It is discipline, follow through, and the humility to know when to close the door to ceremony and open the door to ordinary life, and to walk through it with grace. This is what the plant asks of you, not worship, not reverence for its own sake, but embodiment. The goal was never dependency on the teacher, but graduation. Not endless orbit around meaning, but grounding truth into the way you live, speak, listen, and show up when no one is watching. This is how the plant becomes a legacy, not just a substance you use, but a spirit that shaped your character. Not a high you chased, but a mirror you faced until it showed you something real. Part 16. The sacred is already within. Here is the ultimate truth. The sacred does not need cannabis. The sacred is already in you. The question is, are you willing to live as if this is true? Are you willing to stop searching for the signal outside and begin transmitting it from within? If you are reading this far, it means you are seeking something deeper than sensation. You want more than entertainment or escape. That search, that longing for meaning, is itself the true initiation. The journey does not end with the plant. It begins with you. Not with what you smoke, but what you become. Not with your highs, but how you walk through your lows. The plant may have shown you a glimpse of what is possible. The next step is yours. Will you chase the light or become it? Conclusion. The choice is yours. Cannabis has always been a test, a mirror, a sacred ally for those prepared to meet themselves honestly. When approached with reverence, preparation, community, and discipline, it can catalyze profound awakening. Without these, it becomes just another stimulant, amplifying whatever confusion or pain is already present. The true measure is not in how high you go, but in how deeply you return, and in what you do, now that you see yourself more clearly. The sacred was never lost. We only stopped recognizing it. The plant's greatest lesson is that the clarity, peace, and connection you seek have always been within you. Use the plant not as a crutch, but as a compass. Walk the path. Integrate what you learn. Bring the sacred down from the mountaintop into every moment, every action, every breath. That is the real transformation. That is the legacy worth leaving.